This segment is an important one. Statutes, policies, and practices. All of your hard work, all of your best efforts can be undone in an instant if there's an egregious action that impacts, safety of students. So let's segue, let's have a word of prayer as we go into this important segment. Father in heaven, we continue to learn and grow and to be just affirmed in this important work of providing the best services for the children you've placed in our care. We thank you and we are humbled by this awesome privilege. As now we look and turn our minds to policies and statutes that are designed to ensure that we are attentive to the safety and security of our children. I pray, God, that you would help this information to just maybe be a reminder, a repeat, or helpful to us in some way. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right. There are three types of leaders. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who ask, what in the world just happened? So the point here is that we should be proactive as it pertains to a variety of aspects as far as having a school program is concerned. That those include student and employee safety, communication at all levels. If a teacher is not functioning, if a teacher needs support, if a teacher is yelling at the kids all the time because of their own personal stress, not allowing that to go on for the rest of the quarter before it's handled, teacher remediation, in other words, visibility, you're having eyes and legs to take you all around the school. Now, I know you're stuck in your classroom, many of you, because you have teaching responsibilities, but as much as you're able to, being visible, and of course, problem resolution. All right, we have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable student and to be proactive rather than reactive. And so the key for us to remember is to avoid the avoidable, all right? Those of us who work with children are teachers in that category, and we may have staff, but there are other people who work with our children, right? Or pastors, or volunteers from our churches who are constituents, etc. Those over 18 who are voted to serve in volunteer roles within our churches or organizations within the NAD, or those who are employed by the church and working with the children and youth, are asked to complete a criminal background check, FB 20, that's in the North American Division Working Policy, and child protection training through Sterling Volunteers, and your Conference Office of Education through HR. How many of you have already gone through that process? Okay, most if not all of you. Some, whatever your conference and has in place, and of course state guidelines come into play here. It's important that there's reciprocity along the process, right? So that if there's a lawsuit, they're looking to the organization's highest management system. The school doesn't have much money, so they will sue the conference. The conference may have a lot, and they'll go up to the union and the NAD. So certain kinds of lawsuits can tend to travel. And so it's important that the NAD has guidelines to guide. So parents, I remember when the state of Illinois put fingerprints in place. And then as private schools, we implemented that as well, as a Seventh-day Adventist school system. We had just faithful volunteers and pastors who resented the idea that we didn't trust them enough, that we wanted them to be fingerprinted. And so we had to do a campaign. It's not so much to protect the students, it's protect you. We began saying that because people felt, they really felt offended. Not everybody, but they didn't understand why is it that we did this all along and no one asked the question, and now we had to ensure. And now, of course, no one questions that because we see all the things that are happening or coming to light. So this is the system. It was called Shield the Vulnerable, and it morphed to something else. So we have in place, and I'm not going to spend too much. So working with your conference HR department, there are things that you have already gone through to ensure that this is taking place. All right, field trip. Do you love field trip? I love taking the kids out. I love field trips, all right? But we are local parentis. When the kids are in school, we are acting in the place of parents. It's the law, all right? So that happens on field trip. When we take kids away from school property, you know, the Lord needs to go before us, always, but especially there, all right? And of course, during situations where we're having so much natural anomalies taking place, we want to be mindful of that. So making sure that your conference, I'm sure, has a field trip guideline in your teacher's manual, your education handbook of policies and procedures. Be sure that you always follow those. Safety is always preeminent when it comes to taking our kids out. Depending on the age of the students, you need to have the appropriate student-teacher ratio. All right, if you're taking out preschoolers, you don't want to have 12 preschoolers with one teacher, right? All right, or first graders, that you have 18 first graders with one teacher, or with one teacher and 0 chaperones. I'm a mover, not a shaker, but just a mover. Okay. All right. Drivers. You know, parents are willing to drive, but if a parent gets a lot of ticket, you won't know that unless they go through your HR process, right? So there's a form and a check that your HR person does. So you just want to be sure. We love our parents, we love our volunteers, we would need them, but we want to make sure that they are protected as well as our students. And then overnight trips. Extra caution there, as we have similar gender. I know times are changing, but the rule still, the rule is still that similar gender will be in the same room if you have a chaperone with girls, female chaperone with girls, etc. That goes without saying. Never room alone with a child who's not your child or grandchild. That's a definite no-no. Well, it's one girl and 5 boys, you know, and it's 2 people, not allowed anymore. Mandatory reporting. Who are mandatory reporters? All of us. Who else in our church system do you think of? Pastors, youth directors, counselors, yeah, people who have care of kids. So one who's required by law to report reasonable and suspicious abuse. All right, better safe than never. I had this question here. Can a substitute teacher serve as a mandatory reporter? In the absence of a teacher, they're serving as the teacher for that day, absolutely. But of course, if it's a 2-room school or a 3-teacher school or larger, they would take that information to the principal, and together, if there's a call that needs to be made, the person who actually went through it will be sitting with the principal. So there's that accountability process in place. All right, so here you have a list of folks here, I won't read that, who are mandatory reporters. Negligence. How would you define negligence? We have a duty to teach, right? And to watch over kids while they're under care. Reasonable care. But if there's damage that happens that was reasonably foreseeable. For example, you said, students, I want you to do a stretch break and I want you to run from the table over there to over here. But in the middle of this running area, there's something maybe like this, that kids could potentially trip over, and these are like 2nd or 3rd graders, anything that, you know, or there are cords, and you just see hazard all over the place. That's not reasonable care. The obvious, the things that we know we should exercise due diligence about, that equates to negligence. We have a duty to provide reasonable care, and a child sustains damage that was reasonably foreseeable, then that is a legal term or definition of negligence. So who would be considered as would be considered as examples of negligence in a school or classroom, on a field trip, or on a playground? So somebody give me a quick one example of negligence on a field trip. Permission slip. Not having the permission slip. What would be the harm? that could potentially ensue? A lawsuit, a harm to student. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Letting students wander off to a store without an adult.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the zoo or something.
Just an injury, you know, we didn't have a permission slip, now where do you go?
Mm-hmm. You're saying you injured with...
If the child gets injured, that complicates everything.
On a field trip?
Yeah.
Okay. How is that, is it an injury that they sustain because of the lack of reasonable oversight, you're saying, or how would that help me?
I thought your question was, never mind, maybe I misunderstood what your question was.
No.
I think you're saying if the parents didn't sign permission and the kid got hurt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what you're connecting without, absolutely. So how would you care for that child? You could make a call, have them take a picture of something. Now we can take a picture, send it to me by text, then you have something. But without that, we don't have permission. Although if somebody had an emergency situation, certainly.
Having rusty or broken equipment on the playground.
That's a big one. I have a case study on that one. Now that you brought it up, I may not even go through that, but that's a huge one. Yes, I think I saw a hand. Yes.
I was just thinking, obviously, if the teacher's on their phone or not paying attention, any of those things.
Yep, June recess. June PE recess, yes.
Maybe if you have a kid that has special needs, and then, you know, maybe they react to things quickly, and then you don't have the immediate, maybe EpiPen or whatever, something that should help them, their medications that they must always have, or things like that.
Yes, that EpiPen, yes, those, you know, with our cell phones capturing our attention so much, just sending a quick text while the kids are playing, you know, they're running, they're playing, just looking away for maybe 5 seconds, something happened, you just can't report on it because you didn't see it because you're otherwise engaged. Just one last, I thought, yes?
I know sending them to the bathroom has a lot of implications because you can't have too many in the bathroom. You can't have like 2 in there. You can't have a boy and a girl in the same room.
Sure.
I mean, there's just so many little things with going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like an older one and a little one.
Yeah.
Can't do that because you got things that happen in there and you're not in it.
Yeah, a lot there. I remember visiting a classroom when I was superintendent, and I sat there. I saw one child got up, took the hallway pass, went to the bathroom. 5 minutes later, I saw another child. The teacher was one-on-one engaged. 4 children left the classroom while the teacher was diligently teaching, just teaching on. I got up, you know, it's like you have, you know, that teacher instinct. I got up and began to monitor what's happening in the hallway, and I went by the door of the bathroom and just stood there just to, you know, and then, yeah, I started being the teacher because, yeah, I was there to observe, but I have a responsibility also, I felt, that I, as a superintendent, so, or even just as a teacher. All right. So let's continue. It's almost as if you're seeing danger before it happens. The ESP, right? I always said to my teachers, I said, please help me to have extra eyes behind your back. Anticipate that when the kids line up for lunch, or when they are lined up to use the water fountain, or when they are lined up for PE, there could be a potential bullying that will take place, a potential shoving of someone that could take place. So anticipate what they may be whispering about or saying. Not that you're going to be paranoid, but you know your students and you know your classroom. So anticipate and be a protector of every child in that classroom. Because unfortunately, our classrooms are a place where our children's mental health are impacted negatively. So I'm pleading with you, be an advocate for every child by the attentiveness with which you pay to situations where kids are in social contexts where a child may be excluded. They're not allowed to pass the ball, or they're not picked. They're always the last ones picked. So you intervene and you change that practice. Who else would do it if we can't? And then that kid grows up, they go to high school, and how they feel about themselves, not being included, or etc. So be an advocate. See the danger before it transpires. Supervision, questions asked, who sees, who notes how long a student is gone from the classroom? Who saw Jason deliberately trip the other student? Who is aware that Linda saw what she saw online on the school's, whatever the device is, right? So, just some things to know. How does my school handle cases of harassment, bullying, hazing, cyberbullying, grooming, electronic stalking, just all of the things that we already know. Hacking, by the way, this afternoon, Daniel Morrison is going to come to talk with us about technology-related things. I can't tell you just in this week alone how many suspicious emails I received. I read it, and I checked the email because we get, have you heard about know before? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like know before it happens, right? So don't click on emails that you don't recognize. I received an email from the North American Division Vice President. That was suspicious yesterday. I looked at the email, sometimes you don't have to open email. In your line, you could kind of read the first few words. I said, that does not. So I clicked on the down arrow to check the address. It was not his email address. His email was hacked. I know my email's been hacked a few times, right? My Facebook account has been hacked a couple times. And so these things happen, right? So, and it's going to happen to our students, sexting, phishing, etc. Sexual harassment, if there's any policy that's delineated in detail and is replicated at all levels in our organization, from the General Conference to the North American Division to the union to the conferences, and should be to the schools, it's this one. And it has to be followed to the T, verbatim. If you receive, as principals, raise your hands, teaching principals, if you receive a report by a teacher that another teacher is being inappropriate, you must take immediate steps to follow the steps, to find that policy, follow it to the T, because that's one of the policies that, from a legal standpoint, will be expected across the board. So we tend to just make sure that it lines up with all the conference policy, the NAD policy, that everything up and down the line. All right, recess safety. I went to one of my schools some years ago, and the kids were having fun in the gym, but this was one of the prohibited devices in our conference because of the potential for kids getting hurt, right? And I saw it. Of course, the school was in a faraway area, and the kids were just having fun. So I just talked with the principal. The kids loved this. We talked about it's one of those devices that was under Adventist risk management and the Illinois insurance, the student insurance that your school has. Each conference has a student accident insurance plan. And this scooter thingy, this scooter, it's not covered under that. So, of course, as fun as it is, so there are some recreational activities that are excluded for safety reasons and for your school insurance policy reasons, all right? Here are some others. Tackle football. Now, I know if they would go to camp, there are go-karts, but then there's insurance that covers that, right? But so you have to make sure, what is your student accident insurance? Every school conference has student accident insurance. I see you chuckling there, Ms. Tatiana. Skateboarding, climbing walls, rappelling, parachuting, hang gliding, fireworks, etc. All right, and here's some more. Safety, 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 All right. Now, I didn't bring it down with me, but each school has a flip chart in it, right? It should be in every classroom. We developed those here at the Lake Union 6 years ago. I was instrumental in putting those together with our team here. And we disseminated them to every school in the Lake Union, a flip chart. And we're in the process of updating it right now. So ensure that you have that, not just for decoration, but that periodically as a principal, your team understands the procedure. Where do we go when? What do we do? You have new teachers coming in, which many of you are, and maybe there's a renovation at the building, things have changed, so the posting of the exit places to hide, etc., and I'm going to come to that later on. Everyone should know what we should do with certain kinds of situations, right? So if we don't review it, if we don't practice it from time to time, it's likely that we'll forget. Especially when we are nervous, we tend to forget, what we're supposed to do. If there's a situation and people are just scrambling, so just make sure we go through those. And then, of course, your building inspection. Some states require that there be a defibrillator in the gymnasium. Of course, we are required to have extinguishers and fire alarm signals, those kinds of things. But all of those things that you're already aware about. I was walking somewhere and there was a rug. I don't think it was in this building, it was somewhere else. And the edge of the rug was flipped up a little bit. The rubber part? What did I see initially? I saw danger. I saw somebody tripping. It could have been me. I'm getting old. I am old. Okay, but yeah, somebody could trip. All right, and so I thought of the students, and I said, yeah. So those things, see danger. You're not going to be paranoid, but anticipate those kinds of things. Check things out in your building. When we do an accreditation visit, that's our responsibility to do that. Evacuation signs, etc. Cyber insurance. This was the first time I've had it on this presentation. So when Daniel comes, he's going to talk a little bit more about that. But your conferences, that's who you would talk with. Would likely cover their schools. We have had in the North American division last school year 4 of our academies for whom there was a ransom request because they got all their data, everything, froze their system. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, and 2 of them had to succumb to dishing it out because there was no cyber insurance. So now that's an additional insurance. I told my husband, we've got too many different kinds of insurance, so here's one more. I mean, maybe on a personal level you may not need it, but you may. With some homeowners policies, these kinds of insurance come, but definitely the conferences would probably have on their churches and schools, so you'd need to check with your conference to see what the protocols are, and Daniel will be representing the Michigan Conference in terms of his answer to that, but your superintendents, please check with them to see. And know before, of course, you've raised your hand about that. All right, let's do this. Well, actually, this is the broken equipment.
Can you show that slide?
Oh, sure. John Grundy was a teacher of grade 6. Could someone read that for me, volunteer?
John Grundy?
Yes, go ahead.
John Grundy was teacher of grade 6 at Seneca Avenue School while supervising the children on the playground. He noticed that a part on the merry-go-round was broken, making it unsafe. He instructed the children not to play on it until it was fixed. He also reported this to Mr. Lopez, the principal, who said he would see that it was repaired as soon as possible. Lopez asked the school board for authorization to get the playground equipment fixed. He estimated it would cost $400 to do the job properly. The board noted that the budget was already overspent and took no action on the matter. 2 weeks later, several neighborhood children climbed over the fence around the school grounds on a Saturday afternoon so they could play on the equipment. They especially liked the merry-go-round. While playing on it, the defective part caused several of them to be injured.
Okay, thank you. Somebody made a reference to that. Was the school negligent in not having the merry-go-round fixed?
Yes.
You see, yes, unequivocally. Of course, $400 is just, it's probably $1,400 probably. But if there's a high fence around the school grounds, would the school still be held liable in this case? No?
Well, yes. I say yes because either way, that merry-go-round needs to be fixed, because even when you tell the kids in your school don't touch something, they often do behind your back anyway.
Yeah, there's a term called attractive nuisance. That's what this is. It's an attractive, kids are going to gravitate towards the playground. Now, of course, they gravitate towards their phone, okay? But let's assume that there were not as much attention to phones. Yeah, it's who they are. So you're beckoning them towards your facility, even though there's a fence around it. Somebody who really wants to get down a slide, etc. So it's an attractive nuisance. So we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that these kinds of structures that we have are safe, even though it's on private property.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, we have a responsibility to get that fixed. Yes?
What if you put a sign around it? It's out of order?
Yeah, even if there's a sign around it. Yeah. Even if there, it's called, the term for the law is attractive nuisance. Is there going to be a likelihood that kids would gravitate? Yes, there's a likelihood. Fix it then. So the attorneys, depending how strong they argue, but the law is, that's what the legal term is here for. It's an attractive nuisance. All right, so I encourage you to check your records to see the last time that your school had a lockdown drill with local law enforcement input. That you did a drill, not fire drills, yes, tornado drills, yes, but I'm talking about a lockdown drill where your local law enforcement is there to see, to see that you're doing it right in the number of minutes that you're hiding, your kids are hiding or whatever, in the right spaces, not in front of windows, just to ensure, to give you feedback. It's a good thing to work with local law enforcement, isn't it? Especially in this day and age. None of us is immune, meaning none of our schools. We know what's happening. I don't want to be saddened by even thinking about some of the recent events right now, but it's tragic. This is an area where I would say we need to take a lot more caution and attention to things like shootings and those kinds of things, and whatever we can do to spend time sitting at our board meetings, planning, strategizing, getting input from our conferences, getting input from our local law enforcement. This is the time. All right. No longer are we encouraged to run and hide. We're encouraged to do that too, but we're encouraged to do what? Fight back. It's called Alice training. Counter if you are able to. If they are able to break down the door and come into the classroom, we will hide initially, or we will try to run if we can. So what happened recently there in Texas, right? But as best you can, try to counter. Somebody may get shot, but somebody else may be able to incapacitate, the person, to limit the amount of injury. So Alice, alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. This counter piece has been added to the response. 2 questions?
Mine wasn't a question, it was a comment.
Okay.
We did an intruder alert recently at Wisconsin Academy, and they had us barricade the doors with everything available in the classroom. And then they pointed out, if there's a shooter, there's one, and then there's all of you. So everybody, if the person gets in the room, jump on the person, try to take them down.
Counter, absolutely. So, some people may be hurt, but hey, as opposed to everybody, like what happened, being hurt. Thank you for that. Oh, and then
Oh, I was gonna say, so I can see that happening with the people who have the bigger kids, but us who have the tinier ones.
Yes.
You didn't tell them?
Vulnerable. Well, in appropriate ways. Were you saying you'd be surprised?
I said you'd be surprised at how well younger.
Yeah. Yes.
There are some books, we'll link it in the Padlet that we used at our school with our pre-KK, that are very appropriately written about to be prepared and not scared. And we've actually had our pre-KK first grade, there's a wolf in the book, and they are the ones who come and check that the other classrooms are safe and can they get into the classrooms. They like to be aware of what's going on, because we've had the kids crawling under the tables crying because they've been so scared. It's traumatic.
Yeah.
So we have tried to prepare as much as we can, even the little ones, so they know what to do.
Yeah. With Sandy Hook, and then what's happened a month or so ago, and a couple months, young children, unfortunately, hearing more and more about that, and I just encourage you to take time to prepare them, not to scare them. Think of ways not to traumatize them. Life is traumatizing enough for that, but definitely to prepare them.
I'm just going to add to that if you go on Pinterest or go on Teachers Pay Teachers and look at social stories for younger kids, I mean, I printed off a lot of social stories that will prepare for younger kids to do something.
So, Pinterest. Thank you. Social stories. Thank you.
Stories,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you. All right, so these are just some mechanisms that are used for warning. I know I would hear the sirens go off when I'm home in Chicago. If there's a tornado or a storm, of course, if you're watching TV, there's the alert at the bottom of the television. But in your building, what is the alert? that your village or your town has, that your school, you'll hear that if the tornado is coming through, so many tornadoes coming through areas that they hadn't in the past. Tornadoes are finding their paths through it's just really, the earth, as the Bible tells us, is groaning and travailing. And we see that happening. Your one call, some schools have a one call where the parents are getting a one call, these kinds of alerts. So find out what your school has in place, and if there are safety things that you, based after this presentation and your own training, that you know needs to be bolstered, be sure to share that with your school board and with your leadership. Medication. Before it was just medication. Now we have to add many more kinds of medication that we want to make sure that we have some guidelines for, like the EpiPen, for example. Allergies are a serious thing. Reaction to certain items are much stronger, it seems now, than previously. So how do we keep medications? Where do we keep them? Kept in the office of the teacher, or maybe in the office, or if you don't have an office and you have a classroom, somewhere safe. Parental permission, obviously, for that. And how about, can a teacher do the intravenous medication? What are the guidelines now? The guidelines have changed. Sister Garnett, what are the guidelines for that now in administering intravenous medication? If they're trained, if a student is having a serious reaction and they can't help themselves, you can do it. With EpiPen, I think, you can help with that. Because it's kind of, not as injurious.
I have a question.
Yep.
Do teachers, is it mandated that they have to give, like, let's say someone's having an allergic reaction, the EpiPen, are they responsible for that? Do they have to, or be someone else?
Okay, the parents would decide what medication to administer, right, based on the doctor's order, whatever. Now, one of the reasons I'm teaching is because I don't like blood too much, and well, no, I should say, but that's not one of the reasons. But when, parents push you into certain professions, and, the Lord led me into teaching because, they wanted me to be a nurse or something, and I was like, no, we're not going to go that. But I'm with you on that. But, I don't think you're required to, but it depends. I think in some states, if, there may be a requirement on your part to administer that. I'm not sure if it's Wisconsin or what the case might be. But ask at your teachers in service. Let's leave that up to separate in service. Okay, COVID vaccination. What a wonderful topic. Wonderful, which we don't have time for today, let me just tell you. But mask wearing, protocols, your local context, let's just say that keep it localized, and whatever the protocols are, you want to know what they are and work with them. Try not to use this first year of teaching to put yourself in a situation where this becomes a stressor for you when you have all other stressors. But know what the matters are. Check with your conference superintendent and that local school area about these guidelines, etc. We have no broad policy, and that's state-driven, conference-driven, church-driven, local driven.
You do on the teachers though, correct?
Pardon me?
You do on the teachers though. I saw it somewhere that if they're not vaccinated, they have to get tested every week.
And it depends on the conference and the state. It is. It's not no, we don't have a union guideline on that. Okay, student injury reported. Wow, that's an important one. Whenever there's a student injury, please do not allow it to wait until the end of the day to make a call to the parent, firstly. Depending on the severity of the injury, some injuries, of course, are so serious the kid has to be transported. But even if it's something that is a swelling, a bump, let the parent know right away and let them be part of. Don't decide on your own. Now, if it's just a bruise, a little cut, the Band-Aid kind of thing, and even a text message to a parent, while the kids are working independently, Jane, had just a little accident today, and then just make sure. But then for the more serious ones, there's a form that your conference will provide you. It's called the Student Accident Form. Date, time, what happened, who observed. That's important for the insurance, the student accident insurance piece. That information is needed to submit. So what the parent insurance doesn't cover, the student accident insurance covers. And unfortunately, accidents take place. So with your conference, when you do your in-services, you'll get much more specific information on that, so I won't spend too much time on that. All right. What are some health alerts that would be important to let parents know right away? What are some local health alerts that would be important? Something's happening in the public school area. You've heard on the news that there's this something, and you need to let your parents know. Or somebody comes to school with lice. Pink eye. Chicken pox. COVID. Measles, mumps, just kind of those kinds of things. So yes, make sure that a letter goes home on the first day. And if there's a public, I'm not sure if when you're kind of have access to your local health department so that you can get those health alerts, because sometimes it's a community thing and you just want to make sure that your school communities, because your parents are coming from this community, right, or surrounding communities. All right, so you may need to verify with your county health department certain things, right? In COVID, we did that a lot. We depending on what states you were in, we relied a lot on news coming from the state health department, from the local county, etc., in addition to the conferences. Oh, how many of your schools are being used as polling stations? All right, I've known some schools that are being used as polling stations. And then what is the procedure where your parents, these are strangers coming into your building. Some schools see this as a place, to open it up to the public, which I understand, but are you gonna have school on that day, and where and how? Just have some procedures in place. I think I just saw one hand up, so I won't spend much time on that. But what about funerals? If your school is in the one area of the church, and the funeral is in the church, people are coming and they're staying for the potluck. What procedures do you have? I went to a funeral at one of my schools, and I tested and went into, on the day of the funeral, and tried to go into the school. I knew I was still going to church, and I just was testing to see, and the door opened up. Yeah. So of course, you just kind of check to help support the principal to say, okay, here's a guideline. It's a funeral day, and on any day. I mean, it was some time back when all these rules and guidelines were in place, and we were much more open with our schools, but still. So just know what's happening, work with your pastors, etc. All right. Of course, you have this sign. How many of your states require having this posted? No firearms in public spaces like schools or churches. Do any states have this post? I mean, do you require, in Illinois, I can speak to Illinois, yes. Wisconsin, is it, no? Okay, Michigan, no? Indiana, is it required? So just Illinois then, okay. Okay, media release. Okay, so we love taking pictures of the kids and putting it on social media and on newsletters. Just make sure that the parents fill out that form, that you're okay. Invariably, there may be a custody issue, and parents, when they fill out the forms when registration, they do not want pictures of their kids taken for that. It's very rare, but it does happen. So just make sure that parents fill out the form, that the kids will be in the newsletter, or you take pictures at church on Sabbath when they are performing, that there's an understanding that there will be places where the child's picture will be appropriately shown. Child custody, those files should stay at school forever, at least for the life of the child, and then stored safely, the educational life of the child in pre-K through 10. Or 12. All right, so just ensuring that you have some guidelines in place for that. I have been in situations where mom and dad custody battle type of thing, and the school is at the center of this, because we are the hub for the children. So just make sure that you adhere to the court guidelines. The court, read the court. Dad can pick up on Thursday and Friday, and mom picks up Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Just make sure you as a school, and You may need local law enforcement support, you know, if parents are coming and making a scene at your building. Hopefully that's not the case. All right, your official documents. What do you think they are? What are the school's official documents? You have one here, the student handbook. What else? What else?
Technology agreements.
Oh, no, yeah, that's an interesting point. In the past, that wasn't technology agreement, but it very well may be. Okay, your birth certificate, no, that's not, it's a personal thing. That's a personal student thing. So, okay, your constitution and bylaws, your minutes, your board meeting minutes, okay? So, so know what your official guidelines are, your employee handbook, documents, etc. I had to do a deposition for a legal case that came when I was superintendent. In one of the conferences, I served as superintendent. I had to do a deposition for something that happened to someone when I was 4 years old, born in a different country, which you probably surmise because of my accent. Yeah, but because I was in that position at the time the case came, you know, I had to do a deposition, and every legal document, from the school to the conference to the union to the NAD, they went up and down the line to see whether how that person was treated was consistent 50 years later with what had transpired, you know, then. Unfortunately, it was a very serious case. But I had both the conference attorney and the attorney for the person, the prosecution. But it was very traumatic, you know, but hey, you know, you just have to tell the truth. How do you follow your policies? What are your policies? What are you doing now, et cetera, et cetera. So these documentation, when things happen that need to be at the board level and addressed, we want to be sure that we're dealing with them. HR documents, your conference, of course, would be a tremendous guide. If something happens that's litigious, you must call your conference superintendent. All right, if you're a principal. If you're a teacher, be sure to share it with your principal, and your principal makes the call to the superintendent. And the conference guides you through this process. The conference legal person would help guide you, etc. Student discipline, suspensions must be approved by the, how about expulsions? Do we need to have a board meeting to suspend a child? Depending on what your policy is, you must follow your policy. Follow your policy. If the suspension of a student is based on just you, the principal's prerogative, what is your policy? You must follow your guideline. And if you don't have one, so many policies are put in place after we've gone through situations. We need to have a policy for this, you know, because we didn't. And then you went through a difficult time in a situation, right? All right, so expulsion, definitely the school board. Meets on this one, depending on the size of the school too. If it's a senior academy, maybe a different one, but elementary schools, usually the board is a little more involved. Suspension, the principal probably could suspend, right? And then of course deal with that with the school board, maybe with the board chair, and keep it at a lower level for suspension. All right. Student expressions. Can students, of course, express themselves freely on Facebook, Instagram, and all of the different platforms of social media? Do they have freedom of expression in that regard? And I'm not going to quote any legal cases, especially the one that came out, the Supreme Court case where a kid, you know, threatened and spoke badly about her teacher and the school and etc. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and student won. Yeah, it was really pretty bad. Yeah, so very important here, student speech, just to know what's appropriate. Of course, in a public setting, it probably maybe a little more kind of stricter in that regard, but just ensuring that student expression, there's some freedoms there. All right, of course, please delineate in your handbooks, you know, these important pieces related to bullying and physical harm. What will be the consequence of that, if any? We'll kind of skip through that. Teachers. Can teachers come looking anyhow to school? You have a T-shirt in a political season. If it's political, if it's election time, I come to school and I'm wearing my T-shirt on my back, whatever. What are the guidelines? You know, what's appropriate, what's acceptable, etc. So sometimes you don't have to take on too much, cross that bridge when you get to it, but at least kind of, there may be some conference guidelines. And some of the things, you leave it to the conference to guide you on these, especially in a small school setting. All right, so, but there are some rights, and this is kind of more of a public setting, but things, some of the policies that guide public schools also guide teachers in private school, because it's they're fundamental human rights that the law will respect whether and regard whether you're in public or private. All right. Tax deductible contribution. So I hear that you have a need as a family. And so I'm going to send some money to Johnson SDA School, I heard that comment, for each of you. And I'm going to specify your names and how much. Thank you very much. And I expect a tax deduction. I expect that to be noted by the treasurer. Is that legal? You can. No, it's not legal. I mean, to expect a tax deduction, that's not legal. You can give money to the school, but you cannot specify who it's for and get a tax deduction receipt. If you specify who it's for, the school will gladly receive it, but don't expect a tax deduction receipt, right? The treasurer will not give you one. But if you do not specify who it's for. Now, sometimes you may have creative ways in informing people of the need. I'm not going to stand from here and tell you how, but yeah, there we are. Labor cannot be exchanged for tuition. Oh, so my son, he's going to clean up the classroom, custodian, he's in the 7th grade, he can do that, and et cetera. So just from a legal standpoint, okay? I know there are some little things that happen behind the scenes because we try to help out, but all right. Of course, employment matters. HR takes care of the bloodborne pathogens piece, which we have to do annually, fingerprinting, working conditions. The school, the board has a responsibility to make your working conditions safe. All right. And then, of course, here's a fun one, this first bullet item, assignment and reassignment. So, you've been teaching at your school for 35 years, and now the conference wants to move you to about like 4 hours away, so you have to sell your home. Can the conference do that? Yes. Because they can do that to pastors too, right? But they tend to be a little more compassionate with teachers. But yeah, they do have that right to reassign you. I don't like it, but yeah, they do have that right. No, sometimes you want to be reassigned, and you want to be reassigned, and you welcome that. But yeah, I just want to say that they do have that prerogative. But usually teachers don't have that reassignment as often. It's very rare, unless the teacher wants to. All right, the statuses for teachers are intern. You come in for the first, second, or third year, depending on the conference. Some conferences have just a 2-year intern, some have a 3-year intern status. So, or if you come from another conference into this conference, the Wisconsin conference, you'll be on transfer status for a couple of years, and then you get to regular status, providing that your evaluations and everything goes well. There's also a status called probation status, and a teacher can be put on probation based on the policy for 6 months, 3 months, or whatever the case might be, with support to help for growth in the area. So the conference superintendents will guide that. But I would say to you, teaching principals, document. If you have situations that, teachers too, with a student, just keep a note of it. Even if you put on your text yourself a message and then text yourself and then formalize it in some form of way, all right? Due process. Be fair. Teachers know when we're not, students know when we're not fair. We want to be treated with fairness, and so let's try to do the same. Make sure that the students know that you are each of their advocates. I talked about that earlier. All right, and be consistent. Let's see. Document. Okay, this is a fun one. How much time do I have? 0? What do we have next?
You were supposed to start with Jody.
Jody is ready. Okay, I'm going to transition to you here. I will just go to my immigration status of students as Jody's coming up. Enrollment of immigrant students, that's a huge one that's faced in our union. High immigrant and increasing immigrant population as Jody's coming up. So the law guarantees immigrant and non-English speaking students access to free and public education from kindergarten. It's good to know what the public schools require, right? So sometimes that kind of guides us, and sometimes we cannot meet the needs of a student depending on our abilities in terms of what we can provide. So just good to know the law here. Last bullet point, non-immigrant students eligible for federal programs such as free and reduced lunch. So that's kind of good to know. And then of course, Mrs. Aguilera dealt with exceptional learners. And what's the SCA students, teacher's obligation to a special needs student? We must have that parent release form signed. An IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, we do our best. I had a student who was quadriplegic when I was a high school teacher, which is primarily my role here. Her mother came to school with her every day for 4 years. Some teachers are threatened by that. And the school had to make a big decision on that. For 4 years, I got to know that mom very well and that student very well. It worked out beautifully. She graduated from the Hinsdale Admins Academy. As a quadriplegic student, she was a good friend of mine. So as much as you can, do the best you can. Thank you.